Welcome, Dr. James Beckett Sports Card special recap episode, as I do every 25 episodes now. But thanks sponsors, Panini, Upper Deck, Topps, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Heritage Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. Last 25 episodes, it's exactly 5 weeks now that I'm doing just Monday through $6.99. Starting out, that was the 7 listener questions, the 6.0. I'm numbering them in case somebody refers to a specific episode. They're all titled uniquely. But newsflash, I'm moving to 8 listener questions. I think I can squeeze in 8. I'm getting more questions now. You're welcome to send them in. I don't deal with every single one, but ones that are interesting, I try to address one way or another. And sometimes it's better to address in a specific episode rather than just bouncing back a reply to a comment on one of the podcast venues or YouTube venues. Thanks for those questions. I look forward to 8 listener questions coming up soon. 701 was the episode with John Keating. He's got his own podcast, and he was asking about the first BGS slab and did I remember that? And I actually did, but then Rich told me I misremembered it, that it wasn't an 87 Topps. Dave Kingman, I had the right player, but he said it was an 86, and then we started thinking maybe it was an 85. At any rate, thanks to Wayne Grove, who was one of my partners in my store back in the very early 80s, and had been a longtime collector and dealer. And he had a vending box of all Dave Kingman cards of the same that he'd gotten maybe from Topps or somewhere back probably at the time. He said, hey, here's some. So we graded them all, and they weren't pristine. They were straight from the factory. So it gave an opportunity for us to show and for the graders to have some consistency, and we passed them out. So much for that. 702 was the ways to collect with Kevin Keating. I think I had some overlap in the ways. I don't collect just like everybody else does. So much of the vernacular is who you collect, but I think what you collect, how you collect, and Kevin and I address that as well. I think there's no really wrong ways, I think, to collect. There's what's right for you, and Kevin was just throwing a bunch of ideas out there of things that he does, and he gave enough detail that you can see, yeah, I could do that too. The who to collect, if you come and see my card wall, you'll see it's not a shrine to a who, it's a tribute or a shrine to a hobby. Otherwise, I'd have all Roberto Clemente cards, and I probably do have 1,000 different Roberto Clemente cards. But I don't think that's what I want to do. And the card wall really, it's for my friends, but it's also an expression of me. Kevin and the discussion was about giving us all permission to collect what and how we want. And the who you collect, if all you're interested in is one player, that's fine. But I have a broad level of interest. 703 was about my eBay learning experience. I'm still learning. I'm now trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the money that I get from selling on eBay, because I'm bringing in some money, not every single day, but I'm selling lots pretty regularly. And so they're going into this special bank account, and I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Well, I'm not going to plow it back into eBay. No offense, eBay, but I greatly prefer for the things I pick up to have an experience like the way I'm doing it. So I'm just going to have a little bit more money to spend on dollar boxes and other things that I enjoy doing. 704 was the origin story for Ryan Nolan. Had met him a year ago. He's a sharp young guy. What you want for your kids, you want them to grow up to be a person of value and to add value where they can. And then they'll always have a job and they'll always be appreciated. So Ryan is definitely that. He's already a published author and has a real job as well as a side gig, and he's enjoying it all. And we had some more conversations after this. 705 was the hockey card show idea that Ken Capel and I batted around, something like a Strongsville show, which is required vintage tables that you have vintage cards on your table. They don't want the shiny stuff, but Ken had an idea for doing a show, and I thought, why not just make it all or primarily hockey? And I think that's a way to stand out from the crowd. And Ken was receptive to it. I hope he does it, and I hope I can attend. 706 was another John Keating. He's, again, has his own podcast, so he's not short on ideas and questions. And we have a good time doing that. And so we got into identity and wall maintenance, what it says. What does that mean? Well, wall maintenance is how I manage what's on the wall. And I'm constantly, and I've got another submission waiting, but constantly evolving that. On the identity there, I think I took that in a different direction than he intended it, but just, who you are in this hobby, who you are psychology-wise, and how do you want to be presented, and do you want an alias? There's Peter Parker. Everybody knows who that is now, but presumably in that comic book world, some people apparently didn't know he was Spider-Man. It's okay to have an alter ego or an alias, I suppose. 707 was Rich's story of selling his table. I think he's told that story before, but Rich will be back, in case you're wondering, and I'm going to help him. I'm not going to give him money, but I will try to find ways to get stuff to him because he loves cards and he's a lifer, and selling his table didn't mean selling out. When somebody presented an idea, if I give you this much money, can I have your table? And he said yes, and he had an idea what to do with the money, and he will be back. Again, origin story for Jake Roy, basketball serious collector. I met Jake at the National briefly, and I had promised that we'd do an episode together, and it just slipped through the cracks. My fault, because I knew I'd enjoy being with Jake, and so we actually had a longer conversation. This is the origin part of it, 708. 709 was all of a sudden out of the blue. Maybe, I don't know if it was predictable or unpredictable, but Tom Brady unretired after I'd gone to trouble to say, what's the Tom Brady retirement effect? He's still going to retire eventually, but now he's back for another season, it looks like, assuming he's on the Bucs. He no longer has Bruce Arians as his coach. He got a new coach there. We will see what happens. Everything I said about his retirement probably still in effect, but add another year onto that. 710 was the first part of the interview with Marty Appel, a longtime Yankees PR guy and good friend. And again, you just should listen to that. If you love the Yankees, he's just got all the stories. And Marty, I want to apologize for not bringing to the attention at the time that your second part of your interview was the honored number of 714, which is not just part of Yankee lore. Even though the record has been quote unquote broken, that 714 number is still a number that every kid my age that loved baseball remembered. 711 was Spotting Fakes, Ryan Nolan's book. And he said, well, let me get you a book, sign it for you. And I said, that's not the way it's supposed to work. I get the book and then you sign it for me. I'll sign my stuff, you sign your stuff, but you shouldn't be giving me a book. It was your hard work. I want to encourage him to sell books so that maybe he'll do a sequel. But then the question came up and I thought, okay, I better go get his book now so that when I see him in May, hopefully he's coming to the May 21st Hobby Content Creator Dinner that he came to a year ago in Dallas. If he does make that show, he'd be invited. But I thought, should I get a hardback or paperback or Kindle? And I thought, I think I'll get a paperback. And then I realized that maybe he's selling a lot more Kindles because the Kindle you always have with you, whereas a paperback, you got to throw it in your satchel when you go to the card show so that you're not defenseless. Because I think it's a very useful book if you're buying cards that potentially could be counterfeited and faked. Ryan, I bought the paperback. It costs a little bit more, but you're worth it. 712 was the Mantle versus Mays, Mickey against Willie with Rich Klein. They really weren't against each other in one sense, and I'm certainly going to have to do a sequel. I think Rich and I will do something. I'm also addressing this in the listener question episodes that are coming up. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that, people trying to bring additional insights to it. Again, if you live through it, I don't say it was curious. It just was discussed at times, and I think we'll bat it around a little bit more. 713 was the dueling question with Jake Roy. Once I get going with Jake, we took some time, and he had a bunch of questions, and I had some for him. 714, as I said, was Marty Appel. 715, and 716, both of those are card company box battles. I try to do each one a little bit differently. Actually, each one, I try to treat the companies the same, but I try to treat these box battles in a way that's interesting. I'm surely the oldest box reviewer. It's rare to do it in audio form, so you can't really see. But if you want to know what the product looks like, just Google it or go to any number of places where you can find. In fact, Beckett.com has all the info. And most of these come down to, when I'm comparing boxes, is what kind of collector are you? And the Topps and Bowman Inception box battle, really, which one would you rather have? Some people would still rather have the Topps, in spite of the fact that the Bowman has more autos in the same configuration, essentially, except for that. 717 was the outtakes from Today's Collector with Jeremy Lee. Today's Collector, I think, was a YouTube show that Jeremy has been assisting Collectible, the company, and does a podcast for him. These were some special episodes on a number of collectors and asking them how they collect and trying to lead up to the Mint Collective. We went for an hour, and this is 12 minutes or whatever, just to give you a chance. In fact, I did 720, the same thing. There was a little bit more. And I just thought, Jeremy's an excellent interview. He brought out stuff that has not been discussed in my other podcast episodes. 718 was my episode with Joel Belfer. I had not met Joel before, but we've done a couple episodes together. I really enjoy his e-newsletter. This was Sunday afternoon, and we were talking. Now, he's since come out with his letter, which I recommend. Just look up Joel Belfer, Belfer, mint condition. He's got a daily free newsletter. And we had some off-the-record conversations, which I'm not going to say, which are all positive. But for the record, we both really had a good time at the Mint Collective. 719, the Dueling Questions with Jake Roy. That was the final segment. Again, a situation when I have an interesting guest on Zoom. I'm really faithful to be 15 minutes or less on these episodes. But if I get going and it's good, I don't want to say, hey, this is a great question, but we're out of time. And so I just let it roll. We had enough for 2 Dueling Questions episodes. And I edit some of these episodes pretty heavily to make sure I'm fitting within the 15-minute limit that I've self-imposed. On the other hand, with Jake, and in other cases too, you can see I'm not going to edit it so heavily that I'm going to deprive anybody of content or enjoyment of stuff that's worth being heard. So that's that. 720, again, the rest of the outtakes from Jeremy at Today's Collector. 721 was about nanotechnology. It's coming to the hobby. It's coming everywhere. It'll be everywhere. Problem is you can't see it because it's nano. They have cameras that are the size of a grain of salt. 722, outtakes from Mojo Break. Again, this was at the Mint Collective, minding my own business, walking around and meeting people and seeing what's going on. And in the corner there was Doug and Cody and their team with some podcast station it wasn't soundproof, but we put on the headphones and had a good time. That was one of the first podcasts I listened to just when I was getting started and checking out the podcast world. They're thoughtful guys. They make it fun. I enjoyed being on there. I'm happy to be on. I was on theirs, and this is just a few minutes from some of that discussion. And I'll try to have them on for a longer episode where they can speak for themselves more and maybe some dueling questions. 723, the last one of this bunch, the Panini box battle, same deal, except that one of the few times I did a battle of 3. I looked at the low, medium, and high, tried to figure out, again, what would I do? Not so much which one would I prefer, because that's tainted by the fact that once I open them up, because when I get these boxes, I am not a box saver. I'm a card collector. And so when I get a box, I open it. I see what I got. If I want to hold something back, it's after I've already opened it up to see if sell no wine before it's time. Some of these prospects, you don't want to sell immediately. You may want to put them back and reflect on it. But I did get a good hit on the best box. So then that calls into question, now what do I do? And the other variation of the sunk cost fallacy is that what's done is done. You can't undo what you've done, but you can decide what are you going to do now. The fact that I had a winner in that one box, should I go get another box? But that's not how it works. It wouldn't necessarily be the next one a bad box, or I'm not on a run. It's like in Vegas, if you win a big hand in poker, perhaps you should just walk away instead of thinking, I'm a professional player, I got this. So again, what's happened has happened. Going forward, make a fresh decision. And I decided to, like I said, from this eBay money that I'm going to have, a little bit of extra money, I'm going to apply it in the way I want to apply it, which is looking and choosing and picking out things I haven't seen. So thanks, everybody. Again, still enjoying this. Keep your questions coming, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.